From finance too.
We found that the drilling companies were unwilling to take on the cost and the time that it would take to do a full-blown environmental impact statement for a single site. So essentially what we've seen in New York is the environmental impact statement acting as a regulation and a prohibition on certain practices. Then we got our first Marcellus Shale application for horizontal drilling in Marcellus Shale. In the past, we had been issuing permits for vertical wells in the Marcellus Shale, and as somebody pointed out, we've been doing horizontal drilling for a long time. In New York, we've been doing fracking for a long time in New York. It's the only way to get the gas out of these shale formations. What's new is this very deep hydrofracturing using horizontal drilling in a highly impermeable structure. So where a vertical well, for example, takes about 80,000 gallons water for fracturing, these deep horizontal wells take several millions of gallons apiece. So when we got our first applications for this type of drilling, it became clear that they did not meet the generic parameters of the 1992 generic environmental impact statement. It sounds a little arcane, but as a practical matter, our decision to do a supplement to that so-called GEIS has acted as effectively as a moratorium for the last 2 years as we conducted the supplemental study. And that is what's going on right now. Started in 2008 when these applications came in, and we did a scope, which is essentially an outline of what the environmental impact analysis would look like. That went public. We did hearings across the state, took comments, did responsiveness summary responding to those comments, and from there produced a draft supplemental generic environmental impact statement, a DSGEIS, which was published I guess about this time last year, and in response to that we held another set of hearings and took comments for several months. We got over 15,000 comments, excluding the ones that were sort of letter writing campaigns, the Me Too sort of comments. Although many of these comments were of that nature, and some people sort of saw it as a referendum on drilling. They were against it, were for it. There were thousands of substantive comments, and we have an obligation to go through every one of them and respond to those. Nothing I'm going to say next is a surprise. What are the issues that we saw as needing further study and possible mitigation? And the difference, again, we're looking at the difference between the more conventional type of drilling and this new high volume hydrofracturing type of operation. And it's the water management issues. Water consumption has been talked about already. Transportation of that water and management of that water, the additives that are used in the fracking operations, on-site facilities and handling, flow back and ultimate disposition. So on the one hand you have the water management issues, on the other you have a new approach to the industry practice, from single well pads to multiple well pads at a single site. On the one hand, it's a good thing from an environmental point of view, because instead of one well per 40 acres, you're talking about one well pad for 40 acres, you're talking about one pad for 740 acres. On the other hand, it is an industrial operation, and it's very, very intensive. And this hasn't gotten talked about enough, I don't think. People are very, very, very concerned about the water and fracturing fluids, and all for good reason. But from what I've seen, heard, read, and from my involvement in the production of this document, these multi-site impacts, social, cultural, local impacts, infrastructure impacts are immense. Jan lives with it every day. I've been to Pennsylvania a few times. It took me about 20 minutes to drive from the Chesapeake field office to a coffee shop in Wayanda, Pennsylvania, which is about a half mile, because there's essentially one two-lane highway, only access in and out of town, and it was chock-a-block with trucks, mainly water trucks. Hotels, restaurants, doing well. Housing has become very expensive. Life is different in these towns, and sometimes dramatically so. I compare this to Texas, where you have 1,000 wells within the city limits. And I have to tell you, the industrial side of it kind of disappears. The bright lights don't mean a lot at night when you already have urban lighting. The sound is swallowed up by the sounds of the urban environment. I saw a well at a daycare center backyard. I saw one in a park where joggers are jogging by. I saw one next to a reservoir, and they're actually almost invisible. Very, very different in the southern tier of New York and the northern tier of Pennsylvania, where it's bucolic, and the villages are small, the infrastructure is vulnerable, and the population is going to be subject to what really amounts to a boom and bust type of economy that really hasn't been studied. I'm out of time. Let me just close by saying the public debate in New York is, I've been involved in environmental issues for over 30 years, and I've never seen anything like it. Not Love Canal, not any of the nuclear power plants, not PCBs in the Hudson. Nothing is compared to the controversy surrounding Marcellus Shale. It's an incredibly complex, subtle, scientifically challenging subject that unfortunately is usually summed up in newspaper articles as clean water versus clean energy, or clean water versus huge profits, or clean water versus the economy, which doesn't begin to tell the whole story. I was happy to see Abram is here today, who's one of the few reporters that has really spent a huge amount of time trying to understand the issue. My heart goes out to Ben in trying to do what he did in the short time he had to do it. It's very difficult to communicate with the public, and we continue to try to meet that challenge of transparency.